When the successful black CEO tried to help an elderly woman with her shopping bags at the luxury business conference, a racist white executive mistook him for hotel staff and demanded he carry luggage to his suite. "Take these bags upstairs and do what you were born to do," the arrogant businessman sneered, throwing a $20 tip on the marble floor. What this bigoted executive didn't know was that the man he had just humiliated was Marcus Thompson, CEO of Sterling Technologies, and the keynote speaker whose presentation could secure millions in government contracts. But when the racist CEO realized his mistake, instead of apologizing, he did something so vindictive and calculated that it would destroy everything Marcus had built over 5 years. You won't believe how this story of corporate sabotage and false accusations turned into the most satisfying comeback in business conference history, leaving one man's empire in ruins while elevating the other to heights he never imagined possible. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the marble floors of the Grandview Business Center as Marcus Thompson adjusted his charcoal gray suit jacket and checked his watch. He was 15 minutes early for the most important business conference of his career, the annual Tech Innovation Summit, where he would present his revolutionary data security platform that could change how corporations protect sensitive information. Marcus had built Sterling Technologies from nothing more than a dream and a laptop in his garage 5 years ago. Now, at 34, he was leading a company that employed over 200 people and had secured partnerships with major financial institutions across the country. Today's presentation could secure the $15 million investment that would take Sterling Technologies to the next level. As he approached the grand entrance of the Grandview Center, Marcus noticed an elderly woman struggling with several heavy shopping bags while trying to navigate the revolving door. Mrs. Eleanor Patterson, a 70-year-old retiree, had been shopping for her granddaughter's birthday party and was clearly overwhelmed by the weight of her purchases. Without hesitation, Marcus stepped forward. "Ma'am, let me help you with those," he said with a warm smile, reaching for the heaviest bags. "Oh, you're so kind, young man," Mrs. Patterson replied gratefully. "These old bones aren't what they used to be." Marcus carefully took her bags and guided her through the revolving door, making sure she was steady on her feet. He then walked her to the waiting area inside the lobby where she could rest while waiting for her daughter to pick her up. "Thank you so much, dear," Mrs. Patterson said, patting his arm. "There aren't many young people like you anymore." Marcus smiled warmly. "Just glad I could help. You have a wonderful day, Mrs. Patterson." As he turned to head toward the conference registration desk, a sharp voice cut through the bustling lobby noise. "Hey, you there!" Marcus looked around, thinking someone might be calling for assistance. A tall, pale man in an expensive navy suit was striding toward him with an impatient expression. This was Richard Wellington, CEO of Wellington Enterprises, a traditional manufacturing company that had been struggling to adapt to the digital age. "Take these and bring them to my suite," Wellington commanded, thrusting his leather briefcase and garment bag toward Marcus, without even making eye contact. "And make sure the dry cleaning gets hung up properly this time." Marcus blinked in confusion. "Excuse me, sir? I think there's been a misunderstanding." "I don't care what your excuse is," Wellington interrupted, his voice dripping with condescension. "You work here, so do your job. I don't have time for lazy hotel staff." "Sir, I'm not hotel staff," Marcus replied politely but firmly. "I'm here for the technology conference." Wellington finally looked directly at Marcus, his eyes narrowing as he took in the man's appearance. Despite Marcus's obviously expensive suit, his professional demeanor, and the conference materials visible in his hand, Wellington's assumptions remained unchanged. "Listen, I don't know what game you're playing, but I've been coming to these events for 15 years. I know hotel staff when I see them," Wellington said with a sneer. "Now stop wasting my time and take my bags upstairs." The lobby had grown quieter as other business professionals began to notice the commotion. Marcus felt heat rise in his cheeks, not from embarrassment at being mistaken for staff, but from the obvious prejudice behind Wellington's refusal to accept his explanation. "Sir, I'm Marcus Thompson, CEO of Sterling Technologies. I'm a presenter at today's conference," Marcus said, pulling out his business card and conference badge. Wellington glanced dismissively at the credentials without really reading them. "Nice try. But I wasn't born yesterday. Here, he reached into his wallet and pulled out a $20 bill. I hope this covers any inconvenience and motivates you to do what you were hired to do. The $20 bill fluttered to the marble floor between them. The lobby had gone almost completely silent now, with dozens of conference attendees watching the scene unfold. Some were recording with their phones, others whispering among themselves. Marcus looked down at the money on the floor, then back up at Wellington's smug face. Every fiber of his being wanted to respond with anger, but his grandmother's voice echoed in his mind. Success is the best revenge, baby. Let your work speak louder than their ignorance. Instead of picking up the money or escalating the confrontation, Marcus simply said, I hope you enjoy the conference, Mr. Wellington. He turned and walked toward the registration desk with his head held high. Behind him, he could hear Wellington laughing with another man who had joined him. Can you believe that? Some people will try anything to get out of honest work. At the registration desk, the young woman checking people in looked mortified. Mr. Thompson, I am so sorry about that. I should have intervened. Don't worry about it, Michelle, Marcus said, reading her name tag. Some people reveal who they really are without any help from us. As Marcus collected his presenter materials and room key, he noticed Michelle discreetly signaled to security. Word was already spreading through the conference staff about what had happened. But Marcus wasn't interested in causing more drama. He had a presentation to prepare for, and nothing, not even Richard Wellington's ignorance, was going to derail his focus. Later that evening, Marcus attended the welcome reception in the hotel's ballroom. The event was buzzing with networking conversations and the clinking of champagne glasses. He mingled professionally, discussing industry trends and making valuable connections with potential clients and investors. Marcus, called out a familiar voice. He turned to see David Chen, a venture capitalist who had been following Sterling Technologies' progress for months. Great to see you here. I've been looking forward to your presentation tomorrow. Thanks, David. I think you'll find our new security platform pretty revolutionary, Marcus replied. As they talked, Marcus noticed Wellington across the room, holding court with a group of older executives. The man was gesticulating dramatically, probably telling some exaggerated business story. Marcus wondered if Wellington had any idea that the hotel worker he'd humiliated earlier was actually one of the keynote speakers. Excuse me, Mr. Thompson? A young woman with auburn hair and a nervous smile approached. I'm Sarah Mitchell, executive assistant to Mr. Wellington. I wanted to apologize for what happened earlier. My boss, well, he sometimes jumps to conclusions. Marcus studied her face. There was genuine embarrassment there, but also something else. Calculation. No need to apologize for your boss's behavior, Ms. Mitchell. That's not your responsibility. Still, I felt terrible watching it happen. Mr. Wellington never means to offend anyone. Actually, Marcus interrupted gently, I think he meant exactly what he said. The question is whether he'll stand by it when he realizes who I am. Sarah's eyes widened slightly. Who you are? Sterling Technologies? Tomorrow's keynote presentation? Ring any bells? The color drained from Sarah's face. Oh no, this is bad. He's been talking about wanting to partner with Sterling Technologies for months. He has no idea that the CEO is the same person he tried to tip for carrying his bags? Marcus finished. No, I don't think he does. Sarah looked around nervously, then leaned closer. Mr. Thompson, I know this is asking a lot, but would you consider not mentioning today's incident during your presentation? Mr. Wellington's company is going through a difficult transition, and a public embarrassment could really hurt our relationships with other potential partners. Marcus considered her request. Part of him wanted to publicly address Wellington's behavior, to use his platform to discuss unconscious bias in business settings. But another part of him, the part that understood the complexities of corporate relationships, recognized that humiliating Wellington might not serve his own company's interests. I'm not planning to turn my presentation into a personal attack, Ms. Mitchell. I'm here to talk about technology, not personal grievances. Relief flooded Sarah's face. Thank you. You're very gracious. As Sarah walked away, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to her concern than just professional embarrassment. But he pushed the thought aside. Tomorrow was about Sterling Technologies' future, not settling scores with prejudiced executives. What Marcus didn't know was that across the room, Wellington was already plotting to undermine tomorrow's presentation. He had noticed Marcus networking with several high-profile investors and had begun spreading doubt about unproven companies trying to break into established markets. The evening continued with Marcus making several promising connections, including a preliminary discussion about a potential $50 million government contract. As he returned to his room that night, he felt confident about the next day's presentation, unaware that his morning encounter with Wellington was about to have far more serious consequences than a simple case of mistaken identity. We've only just begun this story, but trust me, it's about to get much more intense. Stay tuned to find out what happens when our hero faces even greater injustice. Chapter 2. The Setup and the Trap. The next morning arrived with the kind of crisp autumn air that made the city skyline look particularly impressive from the Grandview Center's floor-to-ceiling windows. Marcus woke early, went for a run along the waterfront, and returned to his hotel room feeling energized and ready for what could be the most important day in Sterling Technologies' history. As he reviewed his presentation materials over room service breakfast, Marcus reflected on the journey that had brought him here. 5 years ago, he'd been working as a senior systems analyst at a Fortune 500 company, watching talented colleagues get passed over for promotions while less qualified candidates advance based on connections and assumptions about cultural fit. That experience had motivated him to start his own company, where merit would be the only currency that mattered. Sterling Technologies had grown steadily, but today's presentation could catapult them into the major leagues. The data security platform they'd developed could revolutionize how corporations protected sensitive information, and the preliminary interest from government agencies suggested a market worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Meanwhile, 3 floors below, Richard Wellington was having a very different kind of morning meeting. In his suite, he paced back and forth while his assistant Sarah Mitchell tried to manage his increasingly agitated mood. "Sarah, I need you to find out everything you can about this Sterling Technologies," Wellington commanded. "Something about that company doesn't sit right with me." "Sir, I've already researched them extensively for your potential partnership proposal. They're highly regarded in the industry, with impressive client testimonials and—" "I don't care about testimonials," Wellington interrupted. "I want to know about their CEO, Marcus Thompson. Something about that name sounds familiar." Sarah's stomach tightened. She had spent most of the night hoping that Wellington wouldn't make the connection between yesterday's incident and today's presenter. "Mr. Wellington, perhaps we should focus on the presentation itself rather than—" "Don't tell me how to run my business," Wellington snapped. "I've been in this industry longer than that boy has been alive. If I say something doesn't add up, then something doesn't add up." Wellington picked up his tablet and began searching for information about Marcus Thompson and Sterling Technologies. As he scrolled through professional photos and company profiles, a slow recognition began to dawn on his face. "Sarah," he said slowly, his voice taking on a dangerous edge. "Come look at this photo." With growing dread, Sarah approached and looked at the screen. There was Marcus Thompson in a professional headshot, the same man Wellington had mistaken for hotel staff the day before. Wellington's face turned red with a mixture of embarrassment and anger. That was him. Yesterday in the lobby. That was the CEO trying to play some kind of game with me. "Sir, I don't think he was playing a game. I think there was simply a misunderstanding." "Misunderstanding?" Wellington's voice rose. "He made me look like a fool. Do you realize how many people saw that? How many people are probably laughing about it right now?" Wellington began pacing again, his mind racing. In his warped perception, Marcus's polite response to being mistaken for hotel staff wasn't grace under pressure. It was a calculated move to embarrass him. The fact that Marcus hadn't corrected him more forcefully somehow became evidence of manipulation rather than professionalism. "Sarah, I need you to contact security. Tell them that man harassed me yesterday and that I'm concerned about today's event." "Mr. Wellington, I can't do that. It would be filing a false report." "It's not false if I felt harassed," Wellington replied coldly. "Yesterday's incident was clearly calculated to embarrass me in front of other executives. Today he's probably planning to humiliate me further during his presentation." Sarah stared at her boss in shock. She had worked for Wellington for 3 years and had watched his prejudices manifest in subtle ways: dismissive comments about diversity hires, skepticism about companies led by minorities, assumptions about who belonged in certain professional circles. But this was different. This was active retaliation based on wounded pride and racial bias. "Sir, I really think you should reconsider. Sarah, if you're not comfortable carrying out my instructions, perhaps you should reconsider your position with this company," Wellington said icily. "I need an assistant who supports my decisions, not one who questions them." The threat was clear. Sarah thought about her student loans, her sick mother who depended on her health insurance, her dreams of eventually starting her own business. She also thought about Marcus Thompson's grace and dignity in the face of humiliation, and she felt sick to her stomach. "What exactly do you want me to tell security?" she asked quietly. 2 hours before the presentation was scheduled to begin, Marcus was in conference room B, running through final technical checks with the AV team. His slides looked crisp, his demonstration software was running smoothly, and early attendees were already filtering into the auditorium. "Mr. Thompson?" A security guard appeared at the door. "Could we speak with you for a moment?" Marcus looked up from his laptop, puzzled. "Of course. Is there a problem?" Officer James Rodriguez, a 20-year veteran of hotel security, looked uncomfortable. "Sir, we received a complaint about an incident yesterday involving you and another guest. We just need to ask you a few questions." "A complaint?" Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. "What kind of complaint?" "The allegation is that you approached Mr. Richard Wellington in an aggressive manner and made him feel threatened," Officer Rodriguez read from his notes. "The complainant is concerned about potential disruption during today's events." Marcus stared at the security officer in disbelief. "Aggressive manner?" "Officer, Mr. Wellington mistook me for hotel staff and tried to hand me his luggage. I politely corrected him and walked away. There was nothing aggressive about it. Sir, we have to investigate all complaints seriously. Could you walk us through exactly what happened?" As Marcus recounted the previous day's events, he could see the doubt in Officer Rodriguez's eyes. The security guard had dealt with enough corporate politics to recognize when someone was being set up, but he also had protocols to follow. "Mr. Thompson, I want to be clear that we're not making any accusations. But given the nature of the complaint and the high-profile nature of today's event, my supervisor has asked me to recommend that you postpone your presentation until this matter can be resolved." "Postpone?" Marcus felt his carefully controlled composure beginning to crack. "Officer, there are 400 executives in that auditorium waiting for this presentation. Postponing would effectively end any chance my company has of securing the contracts we've been working toward for 2 years." "I understand, sir, but—" "No, you don't understand," Marcus said, his voice rising slightly. "This is exactly what Wellington wanted. He's using your department to sabotage my business because his ego was bruised yesterday." The slight elevation in Marcus's voice was exactly what Officer Rodriguez had been warned about. In Wellington's fabricated report, he had described Marcus as volatile and unpredictable. Now faced with what appeared to be confirmation of that description, Rodriguez made a decision that would have devastating consequences. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to come with me. We need to sort this out away from the conference area." "You're detaining me? For what?" "For questioning regarding yesterday's incident and your conduct here today." As word spread through the conference that the Sterling Technologies presentation had been canceled due to security concerns, the impact on Marcus's business was immediate and catastrophic. Potential investors began withdrawing their interest, assuming that any company whose CEO could be detained by security must have serious problems. David Chen, the venture capitalist who had been excited about the presentation, received 3 calls within an hour from other investors expressing concerns about Sterling Technologies' reliability. The government contract opportunity evaporated as federal procurement officers decided they couldn't risk association with a controversial company. Wellington, meanwhile, was holding court in the VIP lounge, expressing mock concern about the unfortunate situation, while subtly suggesting that some companies weren't ready for major league business relationships. His strategy was working perfectly. Sarah Mitchell watched the destruction of Marcus Thompson's reputation unfold with growing horror. She had seen her boss's prejudices in action before, but never with such calculated cruelty. As the afternoon wore on and news of the incident spread through business networks, she realized she was witnessing the systematic destruction of a good man's career based on nothing more than wounded pride and racial bias. That evening, as Marcus sat in his hotel room trying to calculate the financial damage to his company, he received a call that would change everything. "Mr. Thompson, this is Sarah Mitchell. We met last night. I need to talk to you. There's something you need to know about what really happened today. We're on the brink of the climax. What happens next will turn everything upside down. You simply cannot miss the resolution of this story." Chapter 3. The Truth Revealed and Justice Served. The hotel bar was nearly empty at 10 p.m. when Sarah Mitchell slipped into the booth across from Marcus Thompson. Her hands trembled slightly as she placed a small digital recorder on the table between them, and her eyes were red-rimmed with the exhaustion that comes from a day spent watching your principles collide with your survival instincts. "Mr. Thompson, before I say anything, I need you to know that I'm probably about to lose my job," Sarah began, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I can't live with what happened today." Marcus studied her face, seeing the internal struggle written in every line of tension around her eyes. "What are you talking about, Miss Mitchell?" "Everything that happened to you today, the security complaint, the detention, the canceled presentation, it was all orchestrated by my boss. Wellington set you up because he was embarrassed about yesterday." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. He had suspected Wellington's involvement, but hearing it confirmed felt like having his worst fears validated. "You're telling me he filed a false police report?" Sarah nodded miserably. "Worse than that, he called 3 major investors this afternoon, spreading rumors about your company's instability. He told them the security incident was proof that Sterling Technologies couldn't handle big league pressure." Marcus felt the room spin around him. Those 3 investors represented the foundation of Sterling Technologies' expansion plans. Without their backing, the company would struggle to meet payroll within 6 months. "Why are you telling me this?" Marcus asked. "Because I recorded everything," Sarah said, her voice growing stronger. "Every conversation, every order he gave me, every racist comment he made when he thought no one was listening. I've been documenting his behavior for months, but today," she took a shaky breath, "today he crossed a line I can't uncross." She pressed play on the recorder, and Wellington's voice filled the small booth. "That uppity bastard thought he could embarrass me in front of my peers. He should be grateful I don't have him arrested for real. 200 years ago, he'd have been picking cotton on my plantation instead of pretending to run a company." Marcus closed his eyes, feeling the familiar burn of rage mixed with pain that came from hearing his humanity reduced to such casual cruelty. But this time, something else accompanied those emotions. Opportunity. "Sarah, are you willing to testify to what you witnessed?" "More than that," she replied, reaching into her purse and pulling out a thick folder. "I copied emails, recorded phone calls, documented every instance of discrimination I've witnessed in 3 years of working for him. Wellington has been using his position to systematically undermine minority-owned businesses for years. You're just the first one with enough visibility to make his behavior obvious." As Sarah laid out the evidence she'd compiled, Marcus began to see the scope of Wellington's prejudice. Contract bids that had been mysteriously withdrawn when Wellington discovered the race of company owners. Deals that had fallen through after Wellington made discreet inquiries about cultural fit. A pattern of behavior that had destroyed careers and businesses while hiding behind the veneer of corporate respectability. "There's something else," Sarah continued. "Tomorrow morning, Wellington is scheduled to give the closing keynote address. He's planning to use that platform to publicly question your company's credibility, to warn other executives about unvetted businesses that might not have the stability for major partnerships." Marcus felt a cold smile spread across his face. Is he now? The next morning, the conference auditorium was packed for Wellington's closing keynote. As one of the most established CEOs in attendance, his words carried significant weight with the assembled executives. Wellington took the stage with his characteristic confidence, unaware that in the front row sat Sarah Mitchell, with a laptop and a plan. "Ladies and gentlemen," Wellington began, his voice projecting across the auditorium, "yesterday's events remind us how important it is to thoroughly vet our business partners. In today's competitive environment, we can't afford to work with companies that lack the maturity and stability for serious business relationships." The audience murmured in agreement. Most had heard rumors about the Sterling Technologies incident and assumed Wellington was speaking from experience about the importance of due diligence. "Sometimes, Wellington continued, warming to his theme, "companies led by people who haven't earned their place in our industry try to shortcut the process. They rely on diversity initiatives rather than genuine merit, and when they're held to real standards—" He never finished the sentence. The large screens flanking the stage suddenly flickered to life, displaying audio waveforms as Wellington's recorded voice filled the auditorium. "That uppity bastard thought he could embarrass me in front of my peers. 200 years ago, he'd have been picking cotton on my plantation." The auditorium fell silent except for the damning audio recording. Wellington's face went white as his own words condemned him before 400 of his industry peers. He frantically gestured to the AV technicians, but Sarah had locked them out of the system. The recording continued, playing Wellington's instructions to file false security reports, his phone calls spreading malicious rumors, his casual use of racial slurs when discussing Marcus and other minority business owners. Each revelation was punctuated by gasps and murmurs from the horrified audience. "Turn it off!" Wellington shouted into his microphone, but his voice was drowned out by his own recorded bigotry. "She doesn't even work for me anymore. I fired her yesterday." But the damage was done. 400 business leaders had just witnessed the systematic unmasking of a man whose prejudice had been hiding behind a veneer of corporate respectability for decades. As the audio finally ended, Marcus Thompson walked onto the stage. The same man Wellington had tried to tip for carrying luggage now commanded the attention of every person in the auditorium. "Ladies and gentlemen," Marcus said, his voice calm and professional, "I'm Marcus Thompson, CEO of Sterling Technologies. Yesterday, Mr. Wellington filed false reports with security to prevent me from presenting my company's innovations to you. Today, thanks to the courage of Miss Sarah Mitchell, you've heard the truth about his motivations." The applause started slowly, but built to a thunderous ovation. Marcus raised his hand for quiet. "I'm not here for revenge," he continued. "I'm here because businesses like Mr. Wellington's represent everything that's holding our industry back. While he's been focused on protecting his assumptions about who belongs in leadership positions, companies like mine have been focused on innovation, merit, and results." Marcus clicked to his first slide, displaying Sterling Technologies' client list, growth metrics, and testimonials. "I'd like to show you what you missed yesterday when prejudice prevented progress." For the next 30 minutes, Marcus delivered the presentation that should have launched Sterling Technologies into the major leagues the day before. But now, with Wellington's bigotry exposed and Marcus's grace under pressure demonstrated, the response was even more powerful than it would have been originally. By the time Marcus finished, he had secured preliminary agreements for over $200 million in contracts. More importantly, he had exposed the kind of systemic discrimination that had been operating in shadows for too long. Wellington tried to slip out during the presentation, but found his path blocked by reporters and conference attendees demanding answers. His company's stock price was already plummeting as news of the recordings spread through financial networks. 3 months later, Marcus stood in his new headquarters, watching his employees celebrate the successful launch of their government security platform. Sterling Technologies had grown from 200 to over 500 employees, and Marcus had been invited to speak at business schools across the country about overcoming systemic barriers. Sarah Mitchell had joined Sterling Technologies as Director of Corporate Ethics, leading the company's efforts to help other organizations identify and eliminate unconscious bias in their business practices. And Richard Wellington? His company had filed for bankruptcy protection after losing 90% of their major clients. He had been forced to sell his mansion, his yacht, and most of his assets to cover legal fees from the multiple discrimination lawsuits that followed Sarah's revelations. The last time Marcus had seen Wellington was in the lobby of the courthouse where several of those lawsuits were being heard. The man who had once tried to tip him $20 for carrying luggage was now working as a process server, delivering legal documents for minimum wage. As Wellington approached with a subpoena related to one of the discrimination cases, Marcus couldn't help but smile at the irony. "Hello, Richard. I hope this covers any inconvenience," Marcus said, handing him a $1 tip. Sometimes justice arrives not through revenge, but through the simple persistence of merit over prejudice. Marcus Thompson had learned that the best response to discrimination wasn't anger, it was excellence. And excellence, once revealed, had a way of making all the right people take notice while leaving the wrong people behind. The boy who had been mistaken for a doorman had opened doors that prejudice had tried to keep closed. And in doing so, he had proven that sometimes the biggest mistake you can make is assuming someone doesn't belong somewhere based on what they look like rather than what they can achieve.